There's a point where working harder, it stops working. Most founders don't realize when they've crossed that line. Their calendar stays full, revenue doesn't fall off a cliff, people still rely on you. From the outside, everything looks good, nothing's broken. But inside, everything feels heavier than it should. The decisions linger, conversations get postponed. You keep circling the same issues with better language and less movement. That's not a motivation problem. That's an environment problem. In this episode, I want to pressure a question that most high-performing founders avoid. Why does progress feel slower now, even though you're doing more than ever? You're doubling down on the hustle, you're grinding hard. By the end of this, you're going to be able to tell whether effort is still your constraint or whether the room you're operating in is quietly working against you. This is Business, Bourbon, and Cigars. I'm Scott Joseph. I have built and exited businesses, scaled teams, sat at tables that move fast, and spent too long in rooms that felt productive while nothing, actually changed. This episode, it's not theory. It's about what actually slows down experienced founders and why the right environment changes decision speed more than any strategy ever will. I want to walk you through why most founders misdiagnose the moment that effort stops working. Then I want to explain how decision drag quietly replaces momentum without looking like failure. What is it that elite founders start optimizing for once they realize that speed isn't about hustle anymore? Here's the moment that I see over and over again. A founder, they hit a certain level where the business is objectively successful, revenue's strong, the team's in place, there's no obvious fire to put out, but the decisions that actually matter, they start taking longer, not because they're unclear, but because they're uncomfortable. You start going through this, what I like to call paralysis by analysis, by gathering more input than you really need. You ask smart people good questions. You leave conversations with great thoughts, but no forced next move. All this feels reasonable, thoughtful, even responsible. And that's the trap, because nothing's technically wrong, but nothing's compounding either. What changed wasn't ambition or intelligence. What changed was the quality of pressure around their think. This is the part where most people miss. At a certain stage, growth stops being limited by ideas and starts being limited by decision velocity. Elite founders, they don't move faster because they're braver. They move faster because their environments don't allow avoidance to masquerade as prudence. And I want to break that down. Decision drag is your real bottleneck. It rarely looks dramatic. It looks like reopening decisions, that should have already been closed, waiting for alignment that never fully arrives, protecting optionality instead of committing. It shows up like leaving conversations without ownership or deadlines. None of this feels like pressure at the time. It feels responsible, but every delayed decision compounds friction downstream. Elite rooms don't tolerate that drift, not through urgency theater, but through shared standards. When everyone in the room has suffered from indecision before, patience for it disappears. That's not intensity. That's earned intolerance. There's a lot of peer groups out there. They're smart. They're engaging, even enjoyable, but nothing changes afterward. And the question you got to ask yourself is why? And that's because conversation alone, it doesn't create movement. High-performing environments have three things that most rooms lack. There's decision pressure, consequences, memory. Decisions are named, not implied. Ownership is assigned in real time. In the right room, time horizons are defined before the call ends. And the room remembers what you said you'd do last time. Not to police you, but to preserve momentum. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If no one remembers your last commitment, your environment is optimized for comfort, not progress. If you talk to a lot of founders, most of them will say they don't need networking. What they actually don't need is shallow introductions, performative conversations, transactional follow-ups. So in theory, they're right. Real high-level networking, it doesn't expand your contact list. It changes your reference group. In strong rooms, relationships form because you've seen how someone thinks under pressure. You've watched how they challenge assumptions. You've observed how they handle disagreement. You've verified that they actually execute. And it's that kind of trust that compounds quietly without name dropping or hype. The best connections in the right room, they rarely happen on the call or at the event. They happen afterwards because relevance, not obligation, pulled them together. If this episode is hitting home, you're probably already asking where this kind of thinking actually happens. That is exactly what Me Plus Ultra sessions are built for. They're small, virtual, structured working sessions for experienced business leaders and leaders. Each month includes breakthrough sessions, process sessions, and expert forums. And each one has a very specific purpose. In a session, one leader brings a real challenge or decision they're facing. The room starts by slowing the thinking down, asking clarifying questions, challenging assumptions, and making sure everyone is actually solving the right problem. From there, members are sharing insights, their experiences, and they're giving advice, but it's grounded, relevant, and it's built on what's actually already been pressure tested. If you've been in rooms where advice comes fast, but clarity never sticks, this is a different standard. You can request access right now at meplusultra.com/sessions. Once again, go to meplusultra.com/sessions. Success can create a dangerous side effect, and that's isolation. Employees need direction. Advisors, they lack context. Friends don't carry the weight of the decision. Over time, founders start operating inside an echo chamber of their own competence. Strong environments break that, not with conflict, but with informed resistance. Someone starts questioning the assumption that you're building on. Someone else points out, some second order consequence, maybe that you're underestimating. Another challenges whether the timing actually matches your capacity. None of that feels good. That's why it works. And here's a line I want you to write down. It's worth sitting with. Better decisions don't come from confidence. They come from pressure applied early before mistakes get expensive. One thing I know for certain, and that's founders love discipline. They respect, the grit. They pride themselves on accountability. And all of that matters until it doesn't, because environment will always overpower individual effort over time. Even the most driven founder eventually adapts to the standards of the room they spend the most time in. The right environments they create, right? Like cadence that prevents avoidance, visibility that discourages drift, standards that raise the floor, memory that outlasts motivation. That's how insight turns into movement. Founders who've outgrown weak rooms stop asking about speakers and schedules. They look for the subtle signals, who challenges who, whether disagreement sharpens or does it get smoothed over, if past decisions are referenced, whether outcomes are tracked, how seriously commitments are treated. Those signals reveal whether a room is built for comfort or consequence. Environments like Me Plus Ultra, they don't exist because founders need more advice. They exist because, at a certain level, leadership demands a room that compresses time, surfaces blind spots early, and forces real decisions. Not everybody needs that, but the ones who do usually feel it before they can articulate it. So here's the question this episode really leaves you with. If effort keeps increasing, but progress feels heavier than it should, what's actually slowing you down? Because at a certain point, it's no longer about discipline or strategy or execution. It's about whether your environment still sharpens your thinking or quietly lets you delay the decisions that matter. Most founders, they don't stall because they stop trying. They stall because they stay too long in rooms that no longer apply pressure. And once you see that dynamic, it's hard to ignore. If this episode is hitting, you're probably already asking where this kind of thinking actually happens. And that's what Me Plus Ultra sessions are built for. They're small, virtual, structured working sessions, and they're catered towards experienced business owners and leaders. Each month includes breakthrough sessions, process sessions, expert forums, and each one has a very specific purpose. In a session, one leader brings in a real challenge or decision they're facing. The room starts by slowing the thinking down, asking clarifying questions, challenging assumptions, making sure everyone's actually solving the right problem. From there, members start to share insight and experience and advice, but it's grounded, it's relevant, and it's built on what's already been pressure tested. If you've been in rooms where advice comes fast, but clarity doesn't stick, this is a different standard. You can request access to this type of room right now All you got to do is visit meplusultra.com/sessions, and you can go there right now. That's meplusultra.com/sessions. Go there now. Request access. Cheers, everyone.